Welcome everyone to the fourth round of the Sinquefield Cup 2025. On your screen is the French Grandmaster Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, and he has a beautiful gesture for his opponent getting up to shake hands. It's rare these days to see someone getting up and showing respect for the opponent. Gukesh, the world champion here, signs the card there. It's placed before every game, maybe for the fans. And MVL did beat Gukesh in Superbet Classic in classical format. So Gukesh would be looking for his revenge here. Both players on 1.5 points, 3 draws for MVL. Gukesh has 1 win, 1 loss, and 1 draw. And the white pieces, he'll be trying to get rolling. Gukesh with his customary move there, getting his jacket in order. And this, dear friends, is Chess Mood recap of the day. Chess Mood is a video platform where you can get amazing courses to boost your rating, to learn openings, middle games, and so much more, end games. It's run by our very good friend Avetic Gregorian, and you have 1 month free premium membership if you check out the link in the description and pinned comment. So do check it out and improve your game. Gukesh opens the game with 1d4 and MVL brings his knight out to f6. Now the knight comes out to f3 and MVL takes a bit of time and pushes his pawn to d5. Will Gukesh play the London system here against MVL? No, he goes for the main line stuff with Queen's Gambit c4 and MVL plays c5. This is very direct, not e6 but c5, and Gukesh quickly takes the pawn, showing that he's well prepared here because this is something that MVL has played before. Pawn to e6, attacking here. It's actually in the style of MVL, this move c5, because it's very direct. Bishop e3, and like he played the Grunfeld for so many years. But bishop e3, very interesting move by Gukesh, clinging on to the pawn. Knight c6 played after a couple of minutes of thought. And here Gukesh kind of calms himself down. It was his preparation, but he's trying to recollect it. Knight to c3 played, which is the best move here. And now pawn takes pawn by MVL. Gukesh has 2 good moves here, queen a4 and queen takes queen. But when your opponent is playing these concrete lines, you need your prep. And it's difficult when you have forgotten it. Like here, Gukesh takes 20 minutes to make this move. Queen takes d8. Of course, king takes d8 would lead to a small edge for white. So knight takes d8. And now rook c1 and rook d1 both look interesting actually. Rook c1 trying to put pressure on the c4 pawn, but rook d1 played here by Gukesh. And the thing is, if you go knight d5 here, it's an amazing move and MVL finds it. It's such a good move here, giving up 1 pawn. And now knight takes knight, taken. E takes d5. Rook takes on d5. And bishop e6. Now the rook is attacked. You need to move the rook away. And he comes back rook to d1. So white is a pawn up. But rook c8. Excellent move. Now attacking here, Gukesh needs to create something. He goes bishop d4, looking at g7, keeping his extra pawn, f6, blunting the bishop. So now again threatening bishop c5. He pushes his pawn to e4. There was also possibility to play h4, h5 or g3, bishop g2, but he chooses e4 and bishop takes bishop is on the board. He takes on c5. Rook takes c5. And now knight d4, putting pressure on the bishop here. The bishop goes back to d7. And a very interesting position has arisen here, with white having kingside majority and central majority, black having the queenside majority here. King d2 played. And he brings his knight to f7 MVL. Maybe he's going to e5, maybe to d6. King comes up to e3, just placing the king on a good square, looking to now expand. He brings his king up to e7, connecting the rooks. It's a question, how should Gukesh continue? He plays f3, maybe with the future idea of g4, h4 and trying to play on the king side. And MVL brings his rook to c8. For MVL, it's clear. Go b5, a5, b4, c3. Just play on the queen side. Bishop comes up to e2. And now pawn to h5 is played. He pushes his pawn forward. And white goes pawn to h4. So with h5, you are stopping white from expanding here. Knight comes to d6. You can see MVL slowly and steadily getting his pieces on better squares. Gukesh plays rook he1. I don't know what the rook is exactly doing. Maybe just lining up against the black king, and rook a5, putting pressure on a2. It's getting serious. If you play a3, there is c3. So he has to go passive with rook a1. And now pushes forward with f5. Very interesting how MVL is pressing here. b3. Gukesh is not a player who likes to sit passively around. So he instantly goes for some counterplay. If you try to play c3 here, perhaps this pawn could become a bit weak. So rook e5 played here. So pressurizing on the e-pawn 3 times. And maybe now king f4 is a must move. He plays king f4, attacking the rook. And MVL waits there, plays his king up to f6. Bishop to d1, putting added defense on the e4 point. He brings his rook to e8, and it's amazing how MVL has managed to create the e4 pawn into a weakness. Meanwhile, Gukesh finds another way to bring a defender in. So it takes on e4 here, f takes e4. And pawn takes pawn here, taken. And MVL pushes pawn to g5, check. He's actually playing amazingly well here. Takes on g5. Rook takes on g5. Attacking the g2 pawn now. Another weakness created. Bishop comes to d1. So if you take on g2, he may take the pawn on h5. So bishop d1 and knight to f5 played. What a move this is. Insane. The only move that white has to keep control is e5, but that's also worse. Gukesh blunders here with knight f5, and suddenly he has a lost position. MVL has managed to completely outwit the world champion. Rook takes f5, and now if you go king e3, there is rook takes e4, insane move, and then rook e5 and you win the rook. So king goes to g3, and now rook g8 check, king h2, rook f2, and it's super strong because bishop f3 is met with c3. The c pawn is coming forward, but MVL blunders here with c takes b3. The main point was that you needed this pawn to be in the game. And now Gukesh is back. He can take bishop b3 even. And there's no problem. Like, how did MVL make a move like cb3? ab3 taken by Gukesh. He's attacking this pawn. And now a6 played by MVL. Bishop comes to f3 and all of a sudden everything is safe. Just about everything. MVL brings his rook to b5. Gukesh brings his rook to e3. When it comes to defending in such positions, Gukesh is very good. He's able to find good active moves. Rook e5. You can see that black still has play here. Bishop e2. But this is what Gukesh does. Yeah, he finds good squares for his pieces. Bishop now can come to c4. Rook b4. And you can actually place the bishop on d5. First a check. And I believe it's clear now for MVL that he has no advantage left. King e7. And now bishop comes to c4. Maybe a good idea to actually trade bishops here, because otherwise the white bishop on d5 would have been super strong. Bishop takes e6. King takes on e6. And king to h4. So while you will win the pawn on e4, I'll chop off the pawn on h5. So takes on e4. Takes on e4. Takes on e4. And king h5 played. And yes, b3 pawn is a bit weak. So is the g2 pawn. But the g pawn is a passer. And that's nice actually. Goes rook to e3, attacking the b3 pawn. You can already start pushing the g pawn, but you just don't want to make it a race by him taking the pawn. So he goes rook b1, defending the pawn here. If rook g3, I have rook b2, defending here. He plays rook g3, rook b2. Idea is king h4 and g4. Bringing his king in. MVL still has some pressure, but it's not much. King h4. Check to the king. King h3. He goes back. Rook comes to b4. And now a check to the king. He plays his king to g5. And an important move. Rook comes to f3. Just activating the rook. MVL pushes his pawn to a5. And Gukesh brings his king in. King to g3. Maybe the king could come potentially this side. b5 played. And now rook c3 with the idea of a check. And he plays a4. It's like a draw offer here. Pawn takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. Check. King goes back to g6 and now just put the rook behind the pawn. Check. King comes to f4. Check. king comes to g3, and they found a way to repeat the position. Check. And the game is going to be drawn. Rook b3 check. The arbiter comes in. Gukesh is like, I'm ready for a draw here. And a draw is agreed here. What a game this was between, and Gukesh asking MVL, I think you were better here for sure. And well, we need to figure out what is it that MVL missed that he did not play that move. Rook g8 check. Yeah, nice interaction between the two with smiles on the face. But it'll be interesting to just have a look at that key moment. And we'll try to analyze that point. The players actually know that there was something, which is always very interesting for me to see the top players. They do get that sense, but it's not easy for them to work out all the details after the game. So going to this key moment, here black found this wonderful move, knight f5. Maybe the only move for white to stay in the game was e5 check. And after king g6 here, to then take, rook takes and play king g3. Although here after rook takes, rook takes, rook takes, you are a pawn down, you get it back and it looks a bit uncomfortable, but it should be close to equality. Instead, Gukesh chopped this off. And now rook takes f5. You can't take here because of rook e1 and there's a nasty pin. And king e3 is met with this very nice move, rook e4, king e4 and rook e5, winning the pawn. So that's the reason why Gukesh has to play king g3. And now MVL made this very unusual move, c takes b3. Instead, if he had played rook g8, suddenly this king is trapped. It has to go to h2 and now rook f2. And now how do you defend g2 pawn? There are two moves, bishop f3 and rook g1. There's nothing else actually. Maybe an intermezzo e5, but doesn't help much. So if you go bishop f3, now the best move is c3. And the point is, after rook c1, I'm going to play c2. This pawn is not going to be easy to win. For example, a move like rook e2 will be met with rook g2 and I win this. And you can't trade easily. Rook f1 can be met with takes, takes and rook c8. And this position is just completely lost because even the king is just simply coming in. So rook g8, king h2 and rook f2 here. The other logical move is rook g1. But it also leads to similar thing after c3. You can see that there is h5, h4, h3. There's also c2 coming in. It's just completely lost position here for Gukesh. So this move, c takes b3, is wrong at so many levels, not just because rook g8 was winning, because you needed this pawn to go to c3 to have a winning position in many lines. Once this happened and now you play check, king h2 and rook f2, this is no longer working because now you have no way to increase pressure. You don't have that pawn here on c4 to move forward. So a big miss by MVL when he took the pawn on b3.